Okay, YouTube, what is up? Today I'm going to be talking about Apple. This will be somewhat of a rant, and it'll also be somewhat of a video of their history. I've also got a message at the end of the video, so stay tuned. Okay, YouTube, how are we doing today? That's terrific. Unless you said you're doing bad, in which I'm sorry. Okay, today I'm going to be talking about Apple. Oh man, where to start? I don't even know. Um, I do want to start off by saying I'm not pro Linux, Microsoft, or Mac or whatever. I'm not pro anything. This is non-biased. I don't have a preference. I just use whatever softwares and operating systems work for me. So this is going to be a non-biased video. Okay, so here we go. Now, a lot of people will notice today that Apple is all about being overpriced and proprietary bullshit. Now, as I'm aware, there's no reason for them to be so proprietary. Like, for instance, the USB-C port, that probably is the future, but don't limit that to be the only port on the entire computer. And if you are going to do that, at least add multiple ones. It's not very smart. See, ever since Tim Cook took over the company, it has been all about greed. That is all Apple has been about since 2011. Steve Jobs was all about the best interest of the product. He didn't care about the company, he didn't care about the consumer. He didn't care about anything but the product he was working on. And that's why back in I can't remember when it was. It was, I think, 85. It was like one of the last things Steve Jobs did at the company. Um, he wanted to make sure that every computer that was superior to the Macintosh would no longer be superior because the Macintosh was kind of his baby. Ever since, he got demoted from Lisa onto Macintosh, which Macintosh was supposed to be a pet project. Apple II GS was like supposed to be a big thing, and then Macintosh ended up being the big thing, and the Apple II GS was actually better. Had color graphics, could do more per clock on the processor, and it was even compatible with older Apple II cards, so you could run earlier softwares that were only introduced on the Apple IIs. But Macintosh was coming out on top, kind of, because it was supposed to be the flagship model because it's what Steve Jobs was working on. He cares about the product. Tim Cook, I don't know, I can't say anything nice about this guy. He is a complete asshole. He cares nothing about money. He doesn't care about the product. In the arms of the angel, fly away from here. And he's ruining the whole company. They're focusing currently on the mobile market. And as you guys may have noticed or have heard, Apple didn't quite meet their iPhone sale quota or whatever. They didn't make as money as they usually do. So that should be a big sign that Tim Cook needs to get the hell out of there. But that's not really sealing the coffin because Steve Jobs, John Scully, Michael Spindler, and Gil Amelio, who were all CEOs of Apple at one point, made similar mistakes. And some of them did get thrown out because of it. But anyways, Tim Cook is probably the worst CEO in Apple history. First CEO of Apple was Steve Jobs. He was the guy who promoted everything. He was like, this is going to be the future. Hey, look what we invented. Here's what's going on. And then he wanted to appoint John Scully from Pepsi Cola as his marketing guy, and they became partners and demotions and stuff later. Steve Jobs is no longer CEO of Apple. Him and Scully are still friends, but Scully runs the whole company now. So Steve Jobs got fed up with Apple and just quit. and started another company called Next. While Steve Jobs was gone, John Scully did okay. There were some fair shares of bad ideas, like the Newton, which was terrible. But, there were other things that they did that was pretty good. The company was doing okay. It wasn't until John Scully left in 1993 and got replaced by Michael Spindler that things started going downhill. Apple CEO Michael Spindler, I don't know much about this guy. He's probably one of the most not infamous. He's the least famous of these CEOs because, he didn't have a very long run. He was only CEO of the company for 3 years, but then Gil Amelio is only popular because he was mentioned in the Jobs movie with Ashton Kutcher. But between Gil Amelio and Michael Spindler, the company lost over $6 billion, which is quite a bit of money to just lose. Gil Amelio wanted to convert from Mac system software to BIOS, or BOS, which had a very similar UI to Mac system, and I'm not going to say it's bad software. BIOS is actually pretty cool. But it just was not the way to go for Apple. So the board of directors convinced him to merge with Next Computer. So Apple Computer and Next Computer came together and became Apple Inc. Steve Jobs was originally a consultant until, Gil Amelio saw it coming and he was just waiting for someone to blow the whistle and throw him out. He was CEO of Apple for 1 year until Steve Jobs took over again. When Steve Jobs took over Apple again, in the late 90s, it brought a whole new life into the company. He introduced the iMac G3, which is, I think, one of the most amazing computers ever built, even though it kind of isn't. It is because everybody loved it. It was a pretty powerful machine at the time. Not incredibly knock your socks off powerful, but it was pretty powerful at the time. And it was very easy to use, and it was also very colorful. Because back then, other than Next computers, every computer that was pretty much produced was beige or white. And it's just ugly and disgusting, so he introduced the iMac in a variety of colors. I literally think that, I literally do think, but I think that there was literally 20 different colors that the iMac came in. There's only a couple that are well known, but there are different custom colors you could have custom ordered, but there was 8 or 5 or something that were released just off the shelves. And the colors indicated how powerful the computer was. So if you had an iMac that was this color, this is how powerful it was. If you had it that was that color, that's how powerful it was. The most powerful version of the G3 was the graphite version, which was probably the ugliest because why do you want a computer that's the color of pencil lead? Really? But it was the most powerful, and it was the only one that could run Tiger stably. So, yeah, it wasn't really a preference of color, but the colors did signify that this is what this computer can do, this is what its abilities are.
Anything you can do, I can do better. I can do anything better than you.
No, you can't.
Yes, I can.
No, you can't.
Yes, I can.
No, you can't.
Yes, I can. Yes, I can.
And people are like, dude, great. Yeah, okay. I want the blue one, and I want a red one for my daughter. She gets the less powerful one. I can't remember which one was more powerful than the other. I think the blue one was the least powerful. But anyways, people knew how powerful their computer was just by the color. They didn't have to go searching through software and find a whole bunch of and then have to call tech support and not know what the hell they're doing just to find out how powerful their computer is. So that was a really cool thing. The colors didn't last very long, though, because people just weren't really into that. They were glad it wasn't beige anymore, but having a bright color in your house that doesn't match anything you have in your house, not the best thing there. So, at the time of the iMac G3, they had a desktop computer that was more for power, and that was called the Power Mac G4. There was a G3, but it didn't have a very long life. Anyways, the G4 was also an amazing computer for 1999, and I still astounded by that computer's performance. Today it's not very powerful, it's not very fast, and it can't really do anything. I mean, really, it can't. I mean, my Raspberry Pi is more powerful than that thing now. But I'm still amazed at how powerful it was at the time. It performed at 3.5 gigaflops, which means that it could do 3.5 billion calculations in 1 second.
Vegeta, what does the scouter say about his power level? It's over 9,000!
So the PowerPC G4 processor that was in that computer easily outperformed the Pentium 3, which was clocked at a gigahertz. So that's a 500 megahertz PowerPC processor versus a 1 gigahertz Intel processor, and the PowerPC processor win. In that time, PowerPC was just ahead of Intel and AMD. And actually, Intel, believe it or not, as big as they are now, were at the bottom of the food chain because they were getting stepped on by IBM, Motorola, and AMD. Yeah, sorry, Intel. I love you, but you guys weren't doing good back then. So, yeah. Apple always went with the most powerful processors, and they've always run a processor that was run by Motorola. Once Michael Spindler switched to the PowerPC processors, which were between IBM and Motorola, then they switched to them. My point is, they ran Motorola processors all the way up until 2006. So there was some consistency in build there. Now, the problem with PowerPC processors is you're thinking, if they're so great, then why didn't everybody use them? That's because PowerPC processors are not x86 based. They can only run versions that do not require x86 architecture, which is what Windows needed. So, yeah, you could really only run Mac OS or some version of Linux. So, there was a proprietary connector back then that actually had a purpose. There was a reason why it was different than others. It was called an AVC port, and it was basically a copy of a DVI port, except it did something a little bit different. The thing that people liked with the iMac G3 is you could plug it into the wall, plug in your internet, turn the damn thing on, and then watch porn all day. No, I'm kidding. But people did like how it was all in one. It was super easy to just turn on, plug in, and pull out of the box. So they tried to incorporate that with their PowerPC, their Power Mac lineup, because they were not all in one. You had to have a tower and a monitor. So in 2000, they released the AVC port, which powered the display over the port. That's pretty cool. And the most amazing thing is there was 3 displays that had this port. There were 2 studio displays. There was a CRT display and an LCD display, and then there was the cinema display, which was also an LCD display. And the fact that that port was able to power a CRT screen is just beyond me. That's really cool, because CRTs use a bit of power. So there was a reason for proprietary connections and stuff back then, because all of their parts were custom made to work with this custom part that was superior to this part. But now all of their proprietary connectors are pretty much for no reason. Like, their hard drives and the RAM and everything inside of them is all connected through a proprietary connection. You could resolder everything in there if you wanted to add your own stuff, but it's not worth it. Apple nowadays is just doing absolutely terrible. I'm completely disappointed in the company. I'm freaking sick with them. Their hardware sucks. Their software sucks. It's all bad. I'm just disgusted with Apple right now. I loved them back in the day. I used their products all the way up until like 2006. Anyway, so I switched to like Windows in 2006 and stopped using Macs because all of my Macs I got for free. Like, they were being tossed out by colleges and whatnot, and I just got them for free, and I loved them. So when I first came back to the Mac a couple of years ago, I was shocked at what I saw. It was like so different than it was before. When I came back to the Mac, I came back in about 2014. So I had actually left the Mac for 8 years. I had not used a Mac in 8 years. And I still remembered the basics of how OS X worked, but I came back to Mavericks, which I liked. It was a very good software. It was really cool, and I still like it. But after Mavericks came Yosemite, and it was like a culture shock to me because the skeuomorphism was gone. It turned out that they fired Scott Forstall, who was the designer of the skeuomorphic design in the interface. And their main designer, John Ive, who actually made some really cool things back in the day. He designed the iMac and the TAM. Well, he didn't like the skeuomorphism, so, once they gave him the boot, they switched to the simplistic and colorful simplicity of interfaces today because people have they're I'm sorry guys, but people are stupider and have lower attention spans now. That's why everything's a bunch of pretty shapes and colors. It never used to be that way. We've just millennials. Okay. So I didn't like that, but it's not something I was just going to toss a whole operating system out for. I gave it a chance with Yosemite. It was alright, it was pretty good, except Yosemite had a very big security problem in it. So, El Capitan comes out. El Capitan is basically a security patch for OS X Yosemite. Other than a couple of extra little features here and there, El Capitan and Yosemite are exactly the same. Well, El Capitan did fix the problem with Yosemite, but new problems occurred. OS X El Capitan has become about as stable as Windows XP. I mean, I've actually gotten error messages that go across the screen diagonally with the little frowny face Mac. Yeah, it's deja vu. The security on it is absolutely terrible. You know how everyone says, oh, Macs can't get viruses? Well, when I first got my Mac Mini, I got a virus within 2 hours. So I actually just said and installed McAfee on there, which, mind you, isn't even the best. And I'm not having any more problems with internet security anymore. So, OS X El Capitan, bad security, not stable, and I started off in version 2. Version 3 said, okay, we've fixed the security, we've made it more stable. Nope, they have not done that. I upgraded to version 4, same thing. Said it was going to do stuff, nothing happened. It feels like absolutely nothing has happened. And, not to mention, editing software Final Cut Pro 10 is incredibly unstable on OS X El Capitan. Like, I can't even use Final Cut anymore. It's so bad. It's like it crashes constantly. Thank God it automatically saves work, or it'd take me like 3 weeks just to produce this video. But I mean, I'm like so upset with Apple. Like I don't even know where to start. All of their computers are terrible. The reason Macs are not good for gaming is not because they're Macs. I mean, if you have a problem with Mac OS X, you could just dual boot into Windows and then you could game that way. But then you still can't game because all of the MacBooks, I believe, only the 15-inch one has a Core i7. And if that's a Broadwell processor or a Haswell processor, which I know it is, then it's dual core. So all of the MacBooks, as of right now, only have dual core processors. Dual core processors are not good for gaming, but maybe you're not a gamer. Maybe you like surfing the internet or doing video editing. Well, the Retina display, which is a very beautiful display, I will say, it's very, 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 very nice looking. It's also 2K, 1440p. Well, Intel Iris graphics can't really push anything at that. I used the 2014 MacBook and ran a video in 2K on YouTube. My CPU got hot enough to boil water. Literally, it was 100 degrees Celsius, which is not like super bad, but it is somewhat bad because your computer should not be running that hard. I mean, it shouldn't be running that hot. So my fan is revving at 5,000 RPMs. It's so damn noisy. And there's this one girl I know who was also using a 2014 MacBook. She was playing that one game. What's it called? Agario, Edgar.io. I'm sure you guys know it. That thing's fan was revving just playing that. I mean, they can't even run iLife applications anymore. If you use basic editing software like iMovie on a current MacBook, the thing gets toasty as shit. It's ridiculous. It's a poorly ventilated aluminum case, and heat is only radiating inside of that thing. It's just getting hotter and hotter and hotter. Those things idle at like 49 degrees, which is not really hot, but for an idle temperature, that's kind of high. So they overheat. Their GPUs are not powerful enough to even run the displays designed for them. Like, for instance, the 4K iMac has Intel Iris Pro graphics, which have the same amount of VRAM as Intel Iris. It's a little bit faster. I think it's got a higher memory bandwidth, and its clock speed is a little bit higher. But other than that, Iris and Iris Pro don't have a whole lot of differences to them. The 4K iMac can barely load a video in 4K on YouTube. Barely. Like, why have a 4K display and then you can't do 4K? Not to mention, it can't do 4K video editing, so if you want to get a 4K iMac and do 4K video editing, you're out of luck. So you're going to have to get the 5K iMac, which is a little bit more expensive. And even still, the 5K iMac only has 2 gigabytes of VRAM on a mobile GPU. Now that can do 4K. I think that can do 4K video editing. Might be pushing it just a tad. It can also do some minor gaming if you dual boot into Windows. But it certainly is nothing. It's certainly not worth what you're paying for. And Apple charges so much just for the most basic upgrades. Like, for instance, upgrading to RAM is really expensive. Like, I can't believe how expensive it is for them to upgrade to RAM. Okay, so the base model of the 5K iMac sports a 3.2 GHz quad-core Intel Core i5 processor with a turbo boost up to 3.6. It's got 8 gigabytes of memory, and it's configurable up to 32, which, mind you, is going to cost you like another $3 million. It's got a 1 terabyte hard drive. I'm not seeing anything on here about SSD, so I'm going to assume that that is a hard disk that spins around. I'm just kidding. No, it has to be an SSD. It has AMD Radeon R9 M380 with 2 gigabytes of video memory, and it has a 5120 by 2880 display, which is 5K, I guess, kind of. Yeah, it is. And it's $1,700. Now, that's okay. That's good. But let's look at the next model. Okay, so I'm looking at the next model over, and I'm looking at the specs. Oh no. No way, I don't believe it. Okay, so apparently the baseline 5K iMac does have a spinning disk as its hard drive. I'm looking at this next one here. It says it has a fusion drive, which is Apple's fancy way of saying it's a hybrid drive, which is an SSD and a hard drive. I don't... Really, Apple? It's going to cost... Okay, so if you want a 5K iMac with an SSD in it, a half SSD, mind you, then it's going to cost you $2,000. Now, if you want 2 terabytes of a half SSD, that's going to cost you $2,299. You know what else that price is pretty close to? A Mac Pro. So why wouldn't you just buy a Mac Pro? Now, speaking of the Mac Pro, that thing is gone down dramatically in quality. It's super expensive. It's not worth what you pay for, and the reason it's so goddamn expensive is because it was made in Texas instead of China. So you have to buy your own peripherals for that. You pay $3,000 for a trash can full of Ivy Bridge hardware and AMD FirePro graphics that can't even support VR. Again, it's not for gaming, but still. I've seen people. I actually saw a video by Snazzy Labs recently, and he was testing the baseline Mac Pro, and that was like $3,000 or something like that for that computer. And then he built his own computer for $2,000, and I suppose he could have Hackintoshed it if he wanted, but he ran some benchmarks, and it smashed the Mac Pro. The Mac Pro died. It ran Unigine Valley at 8 frames a second. That's no good. Like, ugh, damn it, Apple. Your iPhones are bendable. Did you know that they want to remove the headphone jack just to make it thinner? Why does it need to be thinner? I'm already having a hard time holding the damn thing and it bends. Why does it need to be thinner? What is your obsession with everything being so damn thin? You don't put GPUs in your computers. You're also neglecting your computers. You update them rarely, but you update the fucking iPhone like every goddamn month. I'm sorry, Apple, I've loved you, but while Tim Cook is running you, fuck you. Okay, if you guys have made it to the end of the video, I am very surprised. I'm sorry it's been a while since I made a video. Once again, it's like the third time this has happened to me. I'm having some software issues. I'm trying to switch to my Windows machine that has a GPU. Or at least one of my Windows machines, which have GPUs. They all do. None of my Macs do. Anyways, so I got Adobe Premiere, opened that up. With iMovie and Final Cut, I was kind of printing my effects onto the video, but with Adobe Premiere, I'm like hand painting them. So Adobe Premiere might be too much for what I do. So what I'm going to try is Adobe Elements, and then if I want to do some weird effect, then I can just import that in Adobe Premiere and do that. So I'm switching between softwares, I'm switching between hardware, I'm switching between tons of things right now. So again, sorry it's been a while, but I also had a friend who made me a new logo, so I'm also going to be trying to do a new logo and a new intro. So I'm trying to completely refresh this channel and give it a whole new vibe. And as soon as I get a software that makes me happy and doesn't make me want to shoot myself, then I will get back to you guys.